Sailor.
The Good Witch.
The Good Witch does come, and there are no munchkins in the movie now, huh?
I don't think so.
Yeah, there was a munchkin. There was a munchkin. But I guess he got cut.
Shirley played the Good Witch, and something so sort of poetically perfect about that. I don't know how it figures, but she did a great job, and she got to float in the sky and just did a beautiful thing. And I think Nick liked Cheryl Lee as the Good Witch. I think it was a beautiful, chemistry. It was really great.
I was so high up in the air that I literally could not hear his voice. And there's David, that tall, down on the ground with a megaphone, and I'm thinking at that time, this is only him would I do this for.
Don't turn away from love.
I love happy endings, especially when they end with two people, choosing love.
So I show up on the set in L.A., and David said, well, what do you think of the script now? And I said, I really like it. I think it's very true to the book, except that you left out the most important line in the film. And he looked at me quizzically and he said, what's that? I said, where Lula says to Sailor, this world is really wild at heart and weird on top. He said, I left it out? So we looked through the script. I said, yeah, it's not in here. So he understood that he had to put that line back into the film. In fact, in the novel, it appears rather early, in the first part of the novel, and sets a tone. What Lynch did, I thought was, again, correct. He put it in the penultimate part of the film. He put it in toward the end, where Lula's pregnant, she's sick, she's in this miserable little motel room, the Hotel Iguana, in Big Tuna, Texas, and it was perfect. It was really poignant. So he chose the perfect moment in which to place the line.
This whole world's wild at heart and weird on top.
People will talk to me about the differences between the novel and the film. And I always thought that the film should be different than the novel. They're two separate entities entirely. And so I never had any objection to what Lynch did or didn't do.
Like Barry said, well, there'll be my version of Wild at Heart, and David, and your version of Wild at Heart, because the seeds were there. But I was, had the freedom, and Barry's blessing, to just, take it and let it unravel, whatever way it occurred, mentally, and that's what happened. So the things were there from the book and inspired by the book. In between the lines, kind of started blossoming.
I'm sorry, Sailor, but that ozone layer's disappearing. One of these mornings, the sun's gonna come up and burn a hole clean through the planet like an electrical X-ray.
Well, that ain't never will happen, honey. At least not in our lifetime. By then, they'll be driving Buicks to the moon.
I was staying in a little motel on the Cape Fear River, which was just on the border of North Carolina and South Carolina. And as a matter of fact, at the time I was doing a piece about deep sea fishing, bill fishing tournaments for Atlantic Monthly. And I woke up one morning and I heard this conversation. It wasn't a conversation from another room, it was a conversation in my head. And I just sat down at the little writing table there and began recording the conversation, just writing it down. And it turned out to be the voices of these characters, Sailor Ripley and Lula Pace Fortune, And at first I thought it was just a little short story, and then I realized they needed more room. So I had to get them out of that room and get them out on the road, get them going somewhere else where they could continue this conversation.
Well, you ain't let me down yet, Sale. It's more than I can say for the rest of the world.
You please me too, Peanut.
I was just really writing down what they were saying. It was as if they were talking to me, or they were having this free conversation and I was in the room with them. That had never happened to me before, exactly. So I suppose these voices had really been in my head for a while, and finally they came out. And that was really the genesis of Wild at Heart.
Sailor boy!
I loved working with Nick. We had one really funny scene in the bathroom. That scene in the bathroom. David wanted me to shock him. And so David and I construed together a line that I would throw at Nick at the end of the scene. I'm not going to say the line here. It's on film. And Nick didn't expect it, and it certainly shook him up.
How would you like to fuck Lula's mama?
No, ma'am. I sure don't.
Lula's mama would like to fuck you. Come on.
Misfortune. I really think you need a cup of coffee.
The first day I think we shot was that fabulous old hotel downtown. And my mom and Nick had the scene in the bathroom together, which I wasn't even really privy to. And then I remember after the scene, Nick came up to me and he and I were about to shoot a scene together. He's like, "That's your mom, but like your real mom." And I remember seeing like some horror on his face, like he'd just been through something with my mom who had to play out this person. And, you know, wherever she went, I know David is absolutely thrilled.
I've been with a lot of actors who did a lot of tricks, and Nick was a very young actor at the time, you know, compared to where he is now. He's become a magnificent actor, and I don't think he'd be thinking about this stuff now. But if you take a step up this way while you're doing the scene, if you pivot up, then I'm talking to you this way. You have more power in camera because you got more of your face showing. You're like this at the camera, and I'm like this. You're getting this piece of me. So we're doing the scene. And then Nick kind of looks over here and steps back, and he's here. So I step here. So we're doing the scene, then Nick steps there. And I step here. And we kept going till finally we were up against the wall, and I said, "Nick, we can't go any further." And then he knew that I'd been knowing all along, and he started to laugh. He's really, as I said, I'm sure somebody had done that to him before. But we shouldn't do those things to each other.
You're shit. You think that I'd let my little girl hang out with a piece of SHI tut like you? Kid, you belong in one of these toilets.
You filthy piece of white trash. You...
It was in Texas. It was where a sailor was, I think, changing the oil on the car, you know, and he was just out there pretty much by himself. But it was kind of a desolate, you know, prairie countryside outside the back of the motel. And David said, you know, it's not a scene yet. You know, I need a guy carrying something through the background. And the AD said, well, we have the guy, you know, and he's dressed the way you wanted him. And so we started searching around for, you know, for something for him to carry. And we found this big piece of plastic irrigation pipe, you know, this big white pipe. And we tried to take where, you know, the guy walked through the background, just incidentally in the background of the action that Sailor was doing. And David said, it's almost there, it's not quite right, the pipe just has to be red. You know, and we all looked at each other like, well, how are we, you know, we found the pipe, we thought we were doing pretty well. but how are we going to make it red? And sure enough, they had some red paint, and we made it a red pipe and made a take with a red pipe going through the background, and that's all David needed. That's all David needed to finish the job.
That's in the morning when Sailor's changing the oil in his car, and a man walks by with a red pipe. And that's a tribute to Jacques Tati from my uncle.
And it is a particular thing, and for him, certainly, had it been a white pipe, it wouldn't have been the same, and had there been, no pipe at all, it wouldn't have been worth shooting. So, those are specific things that he sees in his head, and those are what we strive for. Those are the things that we try to make happen for David.
Jones. He's in that film just this tiny little bit when he comes up to the bar and talks about pigeons. And this was a much longer scene. And there's a couple of scenes that were impossible for me to get through without, losing it, starting laughing. And in this particular scene, I had to wear a kerchief around my head and dark glasses and a hat, and keep the kerchief loose enough so if it started, moving, Laura or Nick well, Freddie never lost it, but Laura or Nick or I would lose it, time and time and time again for the way Freddie was doing this scene. And unfortunately, for the sake of the whole, again, his scene was cut. And one time I was sitting with Dwayne and we were, going over some scenes, and he fast-forwarded on the chem, and I heard Freddie's voice high-pitched, and I made him do it again and again. And I called Freddie in London and asked him if he would give me permission to pitch his voice up for the scene. And he said, whatever you want to do, David, but that's how come that's there.
Pigeons spread diseases. I must have let you see that. Yeah!
I don't like to see films with people, and it's a torment. But that was... it can, they create a feeling of the celebration of cinema that is, you just don't find anywhere else. It's really beautiful. So it's a very special night when you present your film there. And it's so special that it becomes a big moment in your life. And so I remember that, and I remember at Cannes they give you an opportunity to go in the night before when the previous night's film is over. Then the next night's, crew can come in, and you can set levels, see your film on the screen, talk to the projectionist, fix any problems you may see, and get a feeling that everything's going to be okay the next night. And the night before, Fellini had just screened his film. So Wild at Heart fell on that same screen that, Fellini had just visited. It was such a beautiful thing. And the sound, I don't know what it was, but it seemed to be better than it's ever been. I couldn't believe the power of the sound in that room. And the picture's huge. It was like the perfect venue.
And I remember the French technicians laughing when we started to play the first reel. And at first I didn't know why they were laughing, and then I realized they were laughing because they thought that it was a joke that it was that loud. I don't think they'd ever heard a film that loud before. But I had to reassure them in my broken French English that this is the way David wanted it to play, and this is what it should sound like. And it actually did sound very good in the Palais, the giant theater that seats several thousand people.
David went up to the projection booth, and then he wasn't going to stay for the whole thing. And he said, "Barry, when this movie is over, after you've seen it, I just want you to say one word to me describing the film." I said, "Okay." So I didn't see him, I think, until the next day, the next morning. And I said to him, and so he reminded me, and I said, how about 2 words? He said, "Okay." And I said, "Not boring."
You know, you never know what's going to happen. You never know which way the wind is blowing. And I remember David and the actors were saying, well, you know, clearly nothing's happening. We screened the film. You know, we're going to hit the road. And the head of the festival said, "Oh, not so fast. Maybe you should stick around, you know."
There was zero thought that this thing could, win the Palme d'Or. There wasn't that thinking. So it was a kind of a just unbelievable surprise.
I gotta take a piss, Ben. Can I use your head?
Yeah, I guess.
I don't mean your head. I'm not gonna piss on your head, your hair and all. Just gonna piss in the toilet. I enter that scene and I urinate. I ask to use the toilet. With some good slang, I say something like, may I? I can't remember, but something about use. Can I pee in your head, and then I say, not your head, or something, some kind of low, stupid joke like that. But that was the beginning of the scene, and I remember drinking water because for some reason I loved this little game that I would play myself to pee in the toilet, before the scene, like actually pee, like take after take after take. So I was drinking lots of water, and I did it. But at the end of the day, I found out it wasn't a working toilet. So some poor schmuck had to carry this thing or had to bail this urine out of there. Y'all take a listen. You hear a deep sound coming down from Bobby Peru.
Look like a clown in that stupid jacket.
This is a snakeskin jacket. And for me, it's a symbol of my individuality and my belief in personal freedom.
The story is simply that I walked down Melrose Boulevard in the 80s, and I walked into Aardvark's, and it was a secondhand clothing store, and I saw the snakeskin jacket, and I immediately thought of The Fugitive Kind. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to buy that, and is there a way I could wear that in a movie one day? And literally I wore it for about a year and just hung in my closet. And David called me about Wild at Heart, and we went to dinner to talk about it, and I met Laura that night. And I think it was there that I said, gee, I think it'd be really interesting if I could wear a snakeskin jacket in this picture. And he thought about it, and then he came to rehearsals, and he said, yeah, well, let me work with that. Maybe I can build it into the script. And he came up with the idea that sailors should say, this is a snakeskin jacket, and it's a symbol of my individuality and my belief in personal freedom.
Honey.
And that became a running theme. It became an identity for the character. The reason for that is I was a fan of James Dean, and I noted that in Rebel Without a Cause, he had that red jacket that was such a symbol, an icon of that time. And it became apparent to me that the characters that you remember more than any others are the ones that really kind of have wardrobe and they stick to it. You know, it becomes their identity almost, like a second skin. And I thought, well, let's bring these kind of concepts back and let's have Sailor wear the snakeskin jacket and not really wear anything else. Just he's got the snake jacket and the black jeans and a t-shirt, and that's his symbol. And that's really the genesis of that. That was the idea, was to make it a more strong image.